I'm Ava. I'm 29 years old. I used to be a nurse in Austin, Texas. I thought I had a good life. A stable job, a cozy apartment, and a husband who told me every day that I was the best thing that ever happened to him. I believed him. I believed every word. Until the day I found a hidden camera in our bedroom. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I realized I wasn't living a life. I was living a lie. And what the police said when they saw the footage. It still makes my skin crawl. Please, stay with me. This story isn't easy to tell, but someone out there needs to hear it. Someone who might be living through the same nightmare and doesn't even know it yet. Before I tell you how I uncovered the truth, please hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support means more than you know. It reminds me that survivors like me aren't invisible anymore. That we're not just statistics. That we're people. People who deserve to be heard. I'll wait. Thank you. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because you need to understand how I got here. You need to understand that I wasn't always this broken, this paranoid, this haunted. There was a time when I smiled without flinching. When I laughed without fear. When I believed in love. I met Ethan 5 years ago at a charity gala. I was there with a few co-workers from the hospital, dressed in a navy blue dress I'd borrowed from my sister. Ethan was magnetic. Tall, confident, with a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He approached me with a glass of champagne and said, "You look like you hate parties but love people." I laughed. He was right. I hated crowds, but I loved connection. That night, we talked for hours. About books, travel, childhood memories. He remembered every detail I shared. My favorite ice cream flavor. The name of my childhood dog. The fact that I used to pretend I was a detective when I was little. He made me feel seen. Really seen. We started dating soon after. He was attentive, romantic, thoughtful. He'd send flowers to the hospital on my night shifts. Leave notes in my locker. Text me good morning and good night every single day. My friends were jealous. My parents adored him. My dad shook his hand and said, "You take care of my daughter, son." And Ethan promised he would. He looked my dad in the eye and said, "I'll protect her with my life." I believed him. God help me, I believed him. We got married a year later. The wedding was beautiful. Small, intimate, just close friends and family. I wore a simple white dress. He wore a charcoal suit. When we said our vows, I cried. Not because I was scared, but because I was so sure. So sure that I'd found my forever. For better or worse. In sickness and in health. Till death do us part. Those words felt sacred. They felt real. But I didn't know then that the worst part would come so soon. That sickness would take a different form. That death would feel like a daily wish. It started subtly. A comment here, a suggestion there. That dress is a little tight, don't you think? Maybe skip the night shift tonight. I miss you. Why do you need to go out with your friends again? Didn't you just see them last week? I didn't think much of it. I thought he was just protective. Loving. I thought he just wanted to spend time with me. But slowly, the comments became commands. The suggestions became ultimatums. And the love. It started to feel like possession. He installed cameras around the house. Said it was for safety. I didn't question it. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, but he said you could never be too careful. One in the living room. One in the kitchen. One outside the front door. I didn't mind. Until I found one in our bedroom. Hidden inside a smoke detector. I was cleaning one day, dusting the ceiling corners, when I noticed the detector was slightly loose. I reached up to adjust it and it fell into my hand. Inside was a small lens. A blinking red light. I froze. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't know how. I didn't know what it meant. I told myself maybe it was part of the security system. Maybe it was a mistake. But something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. That night, while Ethan was asleep, I opened his laptop. I knew his password. He told me once, casually, while setting up our Netflix account. I typed it in. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were folders. Labeled by date. Each one containing hours of footage. Footage of me. changing clothes, sleeping, crying, talking to myself. Footage from our bedroom, our most private space. I felt sick. I clicked on one file. It was from 2 nights ago. I watched myself undress, crawl into bed, cry silently into my pillow. And then I saw him, standing in the doorway, watching, not comforting, just watching, like I was a specimen, like I was a possession. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for hours. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to tell. I felt violated, betrayed, terrified. The man I married, the man who promised to protect me, had been spying on me, recording me. For how long? Why? What was he doing with the footage? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the walls were closing in. The next morning, I confronted him. I held up the smoke detector and said, "What is this?" He looked at me calmly and said, "Security." I said, "In our bedroom?" He shrugged. "You never know." I said, "You've been recording me." He smiled. Actually smiled. "It's for us," he said. "For intimacy playback. For memories." I felt like I was going to vomit. I said, "You never told me." He said, "I didn't think I had to." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I didn't know what else to do. Because I was scared. Because I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I was going to get it. I was going to find out exactly what he'd been doing. And when I did, I was going to expose him. I was going to make sure he never hurt anyone else again. You think this is the worst part? It's not. What I found next made everything before look like a twisted prelude. And what the detective said when he saw the footage. That's when the real nightmare began. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blinking red light. That lens watching me. Recording me. Capturing moments I thought were private. Sacred. I kept replaying the footage in my mind. The way he stood in the doorway. The way he watched me cry and did nothing. I felt like I was living in a horror movie, except I wasn't watching it. I was trapped inside it. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. I put on my scrubs, tied my hair back, and smiled at patients. But inside, I was unraveling. I kept thinking, what else has he recorded? What else has he seen? I started noticing things. The way he always knew when I was upset, even if I hadn't said anything. The way he'd reference things I'd only whispered to myself in the dark. It wasn't intuition. It was surveillance. That night, I waited until he fell asleep. Then I went back to his laptop. I needed answers. I needed proof. I opened more folders. More footage. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A folder labeled, Guests. I clicked it. Inside were videos of my sister, my best friend, my coworker from the hospital. All of them had stayed over at some point. All of them had been recorded. In the guest bathroom. In the spare bedroom. In the shower. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was criminal. This was sick. I copied everything onto a flash drive. Every folder. Every file. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I had to get it out of that house. I hid the drive in my locker at work. Somewhere he'd never think to look. You think this was the moment I went to the police? It wasn't. Because what happened next made me question whether I was safe anywhere. And the person who tried to warn me? I ignored them. I wish I hadn't. The next day, I got a text from my sister. Hey, Ava. Weird question. Do you have cameras in your guest room? My heart stopped. I called her immediately. She said she'd been feeling uneasy ever since her last visit. Said she'd noticed something strange about the smoke detector in the guest room. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream. Yes. He's been recording you. But I didn't. I told her I'd check it out. I was too scared. Too ashamed. That night, Ethan was different. He was quiet. Watchful. Like he knew I'd seen something. Like he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I played dumb. I made dinner. I smiled. I pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was panicking. I needed a plan. I needed to get out. I started researching. How to report hidden cameras. How to file a police report. How to protect evidence. I learned that I needed to be careful. That if he suspected I was planning something, he could destroy the footage. Or worse, he could hurt me. I started documenting everything. I took photos of the cameras. Screenshots of the files. I kept a journal. Dates. Times. Incidents. I was building a case. Quietly. Carefully. But Ethan was smart. Too smart. One night, he confronted me. Said he'd noticed I was distant. Asked if I was hiding something. I said no. He didn't believe me. He grabbed my phone. Started going through my messages. My browser history. I tried to stop him, but he shoved me. Hard. I hit the floor. My head bounced off the tile. I saw stars. He stood over me, breathing heavily. You think you can betray me, he said. You think you can sneak around behind my back? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My vision was blurry. My ears were ringing. He knelt beside me and whispered, "You belong to me, Ava. Don't forget that." That was the first time he physically hurt me. But it wouldn't be the last. And what he did next. It made me realize I was running out of time. I had to act. Or I wouldn't survive. I stayed home from work the next day. Told my supervisor I had a migraine. It wasn't a lie. My head was pounding, but not from illness, from fear. I couldn't stop replaying the night before. The shove. The tile. The stars. Ethan's voice, low and venomous, telling me I belonged to him. I kept hearing it over and over. You belong to me. Like I was property. Like I was something he owned. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the smoke detector, wondering how long he'd been watching me. Wondering what he'd seen. Wondering what he'd done with it. I didn't speak to him that morning. He left for work like nothing had happened. Kissed me on the forehead and said, "Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning." Like he hadn't shoved me to the ground 12 hours earlier. Like he hadn't stood over me and threatened me. I nodded, silent. My voice felt trapped in my throat. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway. Then I locked every door. Every window. I sat in the living room with my knees pulled to my chest and cried. Not loud sobs. Just quiet, shaking tears. The kind that come when you realize you're not safe in your own home. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this. But I didn't know where to start. I had the flash drive. I had the footage. But I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. Ethan was respected. He was charming. He was the kind of man who helped neighbors carry groceries and donated to local charities. I was just his wife. Just the woman who bruised easily and forgot things. I kept thinking about the nurse from the hospital. The one who'd looked at me with kind eyes. I wished I could talk to her. I wished I could tell someone. You think the footage was enough to protect me? It wasn't. Because what Ethan did next made me realize he wasn't just watching me. He was controlling me. And the way he did it. It was so subtle, I almost didn't notice. That afternoon, I tried to access my bank account. I wanted to see how much money I had. Maybe I could rent a motel. Maybe I could disappear. But when I logged in, the screen said, "Access denied." I tried again. Same message. I called the bank. They said the account had been closed. Transferred. I asked to where. They said they couldn't disclose that information. I hung up and stared at the wall. My savings. My emergency fund. Gone. I checked my credit cards. All frozen. I tried calling the companies. They said the primary account holder had requested a freeze. Ethan. I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. I had no money. No access. No way to leave. I was trapped. Completely trapped. I called my sister. Told her I needed to talk. She said she was busy. I called my best friend. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. She never called back. I realized then how isolated I'd become. How carefully Ethan had cut me off from everyone. How slowly he'd made me disappear. That night, he came home with flowers. Tulips. My favorite. He handed them to me with a smile and said, "I'm sorry about last night. I was stressed. Work's been crazy." I nodded. He kissed my cheek and said, "Let's order in tonight. Your choice." I said Thai. He smiled. Perfect. We ate dinner on the couch. He put on a movie, held my hand, played the role of loving husband perfectly. But every time he squeezed my hand, I felt the pressure, the warning, the reminder. After dinner, he went to bed early, said he was exhausted. I waited until I heard him snoring. Then I went to the garage. I needed to check something. I remembered seeing a box once. A box with wires and devices. I found it behind the water heater. Inside were cameras, lenses, memory cards. I felt like I was going to faint. I picked up one of the cards and held it to the light. It was labeled Bathroom A. I put it in my pocket. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I had to keep it. You think I was getting closer to escape? I was. But Ethan was always one step ahead. And what he did the next morning. It made me realize he wasn't just watching me. He was testing me. The next morning, he made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. He brought it to me in bed and said, "I want us to start fresh." I nodded. He smiled. "I've been thinking about us. About trust." I felt my stomach twist. He said, "I want you to wear this." He handed me a necklace. A thin silver chain with a small pendant. I held it up. It was beautiful, but something felt off. I asked, "What is it?" He said, "Just a gift, a symbol of us." I put it on. He smiled. "Looks perfect on you." Later that day, I took it off. I opened the pendant. Inside was a tiny chip, a tracker. I felt like I was going to throw up. He was tracking me. Watching me. Even when I left the house. I smashed the pendant with a hammer, hid the pieces in the trash. I knew then that I had to leave, that I had to do it soon, that if I didn't, I might never get another chance. I didn't sleep again. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. That smile. That calm, calculated expression. The way he handed me the necklace like it was a gift. Like it was love. But it wasn't love. It was surveillance. It was control. It was a leash disguised as jewelry. I kept thinking about the tracker inside. How long had he been following me? How many times had I gone to the store, to work, to the park, thinking I was alone, when I wasn't? The next morning, I called in sick again. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall, trying to think. I needed a plan. I needed to get out. But I had no money. No access. No one to call. I tried reaching out to my sister again. She didn't answer. I left another voicemail. Nothing. I felt like I was disappearing. Like Ethan had erased me from the world one contact at a time. I opened my journal. The one I'd started keeping after I found the camera. I flipped through the pages. Dates. Incidents. Photos. Screenshots. I was building a case. Quietly. Carefully. But I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I thought about going to the police. But what would I say? My husband put a camera in our bedroom. They'd ask for proof. I had it. But would they believe me? Would they act? Or would they tell me it was a domestic matter? That I should talk to him? That I should work it out? You think the police were my way out? I thought so too. But what happened when I finally walked into that station? It wasn't what I expected. And the person who helped me, she wasn't wearing a badge. That afternoon, I drove to the police station. I wore sunglasses to hide the bruise on my cheek. I wore a hoodie to cover the marks on my neck. I walked in and stood at the front desk. The officer looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I tried again. I need to report something." He nodded. "Okay. What's going on?" I hesitated. "It's my husband," I said. "He's been watching me." Recording me. Without my consent. He raised an eyebrow. Recording you how? I told him about the camera, the footage, the necklace, the tracker. He asked if I had proof. I said yes. I handed him the flash drive. He plugged it into his computer, opened a folder, watched a few seconds. His face changed. He called someone. A detective. She came out a few minutes later. Her name was Marissa. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice. She asked me to come with her. We sat in a small room. She closed the door. Tell me everything, she said. I did. I told her about the gala, the wedding, the cameras, the footage, the tracker, the shove, the isolation, the fear. I cried. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "You did the right thing coming here." I nodded. "But I'm scared," I whispered. "He'll know I was here. He'll find out." She leaned forward. "We're going to help you. But you need to be ready. Once we start this process, there's no going back." I nodded again. I was ready. Or at least I thought I was. You think going to the police was the hardest part? It wasn't. Because what happened when I got home that night made me realize Ethan already knew. And what he said to me. It still echoes in my nightmares. I left the police station with a folder in my hand and a storm in my chest. Detective Marissa had given me a list of resources. Shelters, legal aid, a domestic violence advocate named Camille who could help me plan my exit. She told me not to go back home if I felt unsafe. But I didn't have a choice. I had no money, no place to stay, and Ethan would notice if I didn't come back. And if he noticed, he'd get suspicious. And if he got suspicious, I didn't want to think about what he might do. I drove home slowly, my hands shaking on the wheel. Every red light felt like a countdown. Every turn felt like a trap. When I pulled into the driveway, his car was already there. My heart dropped. He was home early. That wasn't part of the plan. I took a deep breath, tucked the folder under the passenger seat, and got out. I walked up the steps like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't just handed over a flash drive full of his secrets to the police. Like I wasn't terrified. He was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. He looked up when I walked in. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You're home late." I forced a smile. "Traffic," I said. "Stopped for gas." He nodded. "Dinner's almost ready." I walked past him, my legs trembling. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face looked pale. My eyes were wide. I looked like a ghost. I splashed water on my face and whispered, "You can do this. Just one more night." At dinner, he was unusually quiet. He kept looking at me, like he was studying me. I tried to eat, but my stomach was in knots. He poured me a glass of wine. I didn't drink it. I didn't trust it. He noticed. "You're not drinking?" he asked. I shook my head. "Headache." He nodded slowly. "You've been having a lot of those lately." I didn't respond. I just kept pushing food around my plate. After dinner, he suggested we watch a movie. I said I was tired. He didn't argue, just watched me as I walked upstairs. I closed the bedroom door behind me and locked it. I sat on the bed and stared at the door, waiting, listening. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. Every shadow made me flinch. But he didn't come up. Not right away. You think I was safe that night? I wasn't. Because what he did while I was sleeping proved he knew everything. And when I woke up, I realized the game had changed, and I was already losing. I must have fallen asleep at some point. I don't remember when. But I remember waking up. The room was dark. The door was open. And Ethan was standing at the foot of the bed. Just standing there. Watching me. I sat up, heart pounding. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to read my mind. Then he said, "You went somewhere today." I swallowed hard. "Just errands." He stepped closer. "You're lying." I shook my head. "I'm not." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the necklace. The one with the tracker. The one I thought I'd destroyed. He held it up between two fingers. You broke it, he said. Why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing. He dropped the necklace on the floor. You think I don't know what you're doing, he said. You think I don't see everything? I stood up slowly. Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about. He laughed. A low, bitter laugh. You're not as clever as you think you are, Ava. He stepped closer. You've been snooping. You've been hiding things. You think I don't notice when files go missing? When folders get copied? My blood turned to ice. He knew. He knew about the flash drive. About the police. About everything. I backed away, but he grabbed my wrist. Hard. You're mine, he said. You don't get to leave. You don't get to betray me. I tried to pull away, but he yanked me forward. You want to see what happens to traitors? He hissed. You want to see what happens when you lie to me? I screamed. Loud. Louder than I ever had before. He slapped me. Hard. My head snapped to the side. I tasted blood. But I didn't stop screaming. I screamed again. And again. And again. Until I heard footsteps. Until I heard a voice. Is everything okay in there? It was our neighbor, Mr. Delgado. He lived next door. Retired firefighter. Always mowing his lawn. Always waving hello. Ethan froze. I screamed again. Help. Please. Ethan clamped a hand over my mouth, but it was too late. Mr. Delgado was banging on the front door. Ava. Are you all right? Ethan let go. Don't say a word, he whispered. Don't you dare. He stormed downstairs. I heard the door open. Muffled voices. Then shouting. Then silence. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. My husband, I whispered. He's hurting me. Please. Please send someone. You think the police arrived in time? They did. But what they found when they got there, that was just the beginning. Because Ethan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The police arrived within minutes. I heard the sirens before I saw the lights. Ethan was still downstairs, arguing with Mr. Delgado, trying to convince him everything was fine. I stayed upstairs, clutching my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if they'd believe me. I didn't know if Ethan would try to lie his way out of it again. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. 2 officers came to the door. Mr. Delgado waved them in. Ethan stepped back, his hands raised like he was the victim. There's been a misunderstanding, he said. My wife's been under a lot of stress lately. She's not well. I heard him say it. I heard him try to twist the narrative. Again. I walked down the stairs slowly, my face still stinging from the slap, my lips swollen, my eyes red. One of the officers looked at me and stopped. Ma'am, he said gently. Are you okay? I nodded. Then I shook my head. No, I whispered. He hit me. Ethan's face changed. He stepped forward. She's confused, he said. She's been acting erratic. She's paranoid. I think she needs help. The officer raised a hand. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step back. Ethan hesitated. Then he smiled. That same cold, calculated smile. Of course, he said. I just want what's best for her. They separated us. Took me outside. Sat me down on the porch. One officer stayed with Ethan. The other sat beside me. Can you tell me what happened? He asked. I told him everything. The cameras. The footage. The tracker. The slap. The threats. I told him about the flash drive. About the police station. About Detective Marissa. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, You did the right thing calling us. You think Ethan was arrested that night? He wasn't. Because what he did next proved just how far he was willing to go to keep control. And the way he twisted the truth? It almost worked. The officers went back inside. They spoke to Ethan. Asked him questions. He played his part perfectly. Calm. Concerned. cooperative. He told them I'd been struggling with anxiety, that I'd been seeing things, that I'd accused him of things before, that I'd even hurt myself once and blamed him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was rewriting history, erasing the truth. And they were listening. One of the officers came back out. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have any visible injuries?" I nodded, showed him my lip, my cheek, my wrist. He took photos, made notes. Then he said, "Do you feel safe staying here tonight?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." He nodded. "We can help you find a shelter, or we can escort you somewhere safe." I thought about Camille, the advocate Detective Marissa had mentioned. I gave them her name. They made a call. Camille met me at the station an hour later. She was warm, calm, steady. She handed me a bottle of water and said, "You're safe now." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I kept thinking about Ethan, about the way he'd looked at me, about the way he'd smiled when the officers walked in. Like he knew he'd get away with it. Like he'd done this before. Camille drove me to a safe house. It was quiet, clean, hidden. There were other women there. Survivors. Fighters. I didn't speak much that first night. I just curled up on the bed and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was angry. Furious. That he'd done this to me. That he'd gotten away with it. That I'd let it happen for so long. You think the safe house was the end of my story? It wasn't. Because what happened the next morning proved Ethan wasn't done with me. And the way he found me, it still haunts me. I woke up to a knock on the door. Camille opened it. Her face was pale. "Ava," she said, "we need to talk." I sat up. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "Ethan called the station. Said you stole something from him. Said you took private property." My blood ran cold. "He's talking about the flash drive," I said. She nodded. "He's claiming it contains sensitive business information, that you accessed it illegally." I couldn't believe it. He was turning the evidence against me, trying to make me the criminal. Camille said, "Don't worry. We've already spoken to Detective Marissa. She's backing you. But you need to be prepared. He's going to fight this. He's going to try to discredit you." I nodded. "I'm ready," I said. But I wasn't. Not really. Because what happened next proved Ethan wasn't just manipulative. He was dangerous. That afternoon, someone tried to break into the safe house. The security system went off. The cameras caught a man in a hoodie trying to pry open the back door. He ran when the alarm sounded. But I knew it was him. I knew it was Ethan. Camille called the police. They reviewed the footage. It wasn't clear enough to make an arrest. But they increased security, moved me to a different location. I felt like I was living in a spy thriller. But this wasn't fiction. This was my life. You think Ethan was just trying to scare me? He wasn't. Because what he did next crossed a line even I didn't think he'd cross. And when I saw the message he left, I knew I had to fight back. I didn't sleep that night either. Even in the new safe house, with reinforced locks and security cameras and a panic button by the bed, I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I tried, I saw his face. That smile. That calm, smug expression. The way he looked at me when the police showed up, like he already knew how it would end. Like he'd already planned his next move. And maybe he had. Because the next morning, I got a message that made my blood run cold. It was a text. From an unknown number. Just one sentence. "I know where you are." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. A minute later, another message came through. "You think you're safe? You're not. You never were." I dropped the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I ran to Camille's room and showed her the messages. She took one look and called the police. They traced the number. It was a burner phone. Untraceable. Disposable. But we both knew who it was. Ethan. He was watching. He was hunting. And he wanted me to know it. The police increased patrols around the safe house. They gave me a new phone. They told me not to go anywhere alone. Camille stayed close. She was calm, but I could see the worry in her eyes. He's escalating, she said. He's losing control, and that makes him dangerous. I nodded. I already knew. I'd lived with that danger for years. I'd slept beside it, kissed it goodnight, called it husband. You think I was ready to fight back? I wasn't. Not yet. Because what Ethan did next wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. And it nearly broke me. 2 days later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A physical letter. Delivered to the safe house. No return address. Just my name, written in Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a photo. A photo of me. Taken through a window. I was sitting on the couch, reading. The timestamp was from the night before. He'd been outside. Watching. Photographing. Taunting. There was a note, too. Just 5 words. You'll never be rid of me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I dropped the letter and backed away like it was poison. Camille picked it up with gloves and called the police again. They took it as evidence. But there were no fingerprints. No DNA. Nothing they could use. Just another reminder that Ethan was always one step ahead. Always watching. Always waiting. I started to unravel. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I jumped at every sound. Every knock on the door. Every creak of the floorboards. I felt like I was losing my mind. Like he was still inside my head, even though he wasn't in the room. Camille tried to help. She brought in a therapist. A woman named Dr. Patel. She was kind. Gentle. She listened. She didn't push. She just let me talk. I told her everything. The cameras. The tracker. The slap. The threats. The messages. The photo. I told her how I felt like I was disappearing. Like I didn't know who I was anymore. She nodded. That's what abusers do, she said. They erase you. Piece by piece. Until all that's left is fear. I asked her how to get it back. My voice. My strength. Myself. She said, you start by telling your story. Out loud. Without shame. You think telling my story was easy? It wasn't. But when I finally spoke the truth, really spoke it, it changed everything. And the person who heard it. She didn't just listen. She believed me. That night, I sat down with Camille and Dr. Patel and told them everything. Not just the facts. Not just the timeline. But the feelings. The fear. The shame. The guilt. The way I blamed myself for staying. The way I hated myself for not leaving sooner. The way I still sometimes missed the version of Ethan I thought was real. The version who brought me flowers. Who kissed my forehead. Who said he loved me. I cried. I shook. I broke. But I didn't stop. I kept talking until there was nothing left to say. And when I was done, Camille reached across the table and took my hand. You're not weak, she said. You're not broken. You're surviving. And that's the bravest thing anyone can do. I nodded. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Something small. Something fragile. But something real. Hope. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Marissa. We've got something, she said. A judge approved a warrant. We're searching Ethan's house today. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. Do you think you'll find anything? I asked. She paused. I think we'll find everything. You think the search would bring closure? It didn't. Because what they found in that house, it was worse than I ever imagined. And it proved one thing. Ethan wasn't just watching me. He was preparing for something much darker. Detective Marissa called me just after noon. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. We finished the search, she said. You need to come in. I didn't ask what they found. I already knew it wasn't going to be good. Camille drove me to the station. The air felt heavy. Like something was about to shift. Like the truth was finally ready to show its face. When we arrived, Marissa met us at the door. She led us down a hallway, past desks and offices and ringing phones, into a small conference room. She closed the door behind us and sat down across from me. We found multiple hidden cameras, she said. In the bedroom. The bathroom. The guest room. Even inside a vent in the hallway. I nodded. I'd suspected as much. We also found a locked cabinet in the basement, she continued. Inside were dozens of memory cards. Labeled. Catalogued. Organized by date and location. I felt my stomach turn. Was it just me? I asked. She hesitated. No, she said. There were recordings of other women. Friends. Family. Visitors. Some of them were explicit. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. He's been doing this for years, I whispered. Marissa nodded. Yes. And he's been careful. Very careful. But not careful enough. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos. Screenshots. Evidence. I saw myself. Sleeping. Dressing. Crying. I saw my sister. My best friend. My coworker from the hospital. All of them had been recorded. Violated. Betrayed. I felt sick. Camille reached over and closed the folder. You don't have to look, she said. But I did. I needed to see it. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done. You think the footage was the worst part? It wasn't. Because what they found in the second cabinet proved Ethan wasn't just watching. He was planning. And what he planned. It still makes my skin crawl. Marissa opened another folder. We found journals, she said. His journals. Detailed entries. Notes about your behavior. Your routines. Your moods. He tracked everything. What time you woke up. What you ate. How long you showered. Who you called. What you said. I felt like I was drowning. Like the walls were closing in. Why? I asked. Why would he do that? Marissa looked me in the eye. Control, she said. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about obsession. It was about domination. He wanted to own you. Every part of you. Your body. Your mind. Your time. Your choices. I nodded slowly. He almost did, I whispered. He almost erased me. Camille leaned forward. But he didn't, she said. You're here. You fought back. You exposed him. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I kept thinking about the messages. The photo. The letter. The way he always seemed to be one step ahead. What happens now? I asked. Marissa said, we're building a case. We've got enough to press charges. But we need your testimony. We need you to be ready. I nodded. I'll do it, I said. Whatever it takes. You think pressing charges was the end? It wasn't. Because what Ethan did next wasn't just desperate, it was dangerous. And it nearly cost me everything. That night, I returned to the safe house. Camille stayed with me. We didn't talk much. I just sat on the bed, staring at the wall, trying to process everything. The footage. The journals. The cameras. The fact that the man I married had turned our home into a prison. I kept thinking about the first time he said, I love you. How I believed him. How I'd let that belief blind me. Around midnight, the power went out. The lights flickered once. Then everything went dark. Camille grabbed her phone. Stay here, she said. I'll check the fuse box. I nodded, my heart racing. I heard her footsteps fade down the hallway. Then silence. Then a sound. A creak. A door opening. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for my phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the panic button by the bed and pressed it. Nothing happened. No alarm. No response. I pressed it again. Still nothing. I backed into the corner of the room, my eyes wide, my heart pounding. The door creaked open. And there he was. Ethan. Standing in the doorway. Smiling. You think this was the moment I gave up? It wasn't. Because what happened next proved that even in the darkest moment, I still had fight left in me. And that fight. It saved my life. He stood in the doorway like he belonged there. Like he hadn't broken into a secure facility. Like he hadn't violated every boundary I'd ever had. His face was calm. Too calm. That same smug expression he wore when he lied to the police. When he handed me the necklace. When he watched me cry through a hidden lens. I froze. My body went rigid. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't scream. Ethan stepped into the room slowly, deliberately. "You thought you could hide from me," he said. His voice was soft, controlled. "You thought a few cops and a locked door would keep me away?" I backed up until my spine hit the wall. My hands searched blindly for something, anything, to defend myself. A lamp. A chair. A book. Nothing. Just air and fear. "I told you," he continued. "You belong to me. You always have." I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Not anymore." He smiled. "You think this changes anything? You think your little escape means you're free?" He took another step forward. "You're not free, Ava. You're mine. You'll always be mine." I reached for the panic button again. Pressed it. Still nothing. He must have disabled it. Cut the power. Jammed the signal. I didn't know how. I just knew it wasn't working. Camille was still downstairs. I prayed she'd heard something. That she was calling for help. That someone was coming. But I couldn't wait. I had to act. I had to fight. You think I froze in fear? I didn't. Because in that moment, something inside me snapped. And what I did next. It wasn't just survival. It was defiance. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and swung it. Hard. It hit his shoulder and shattered. He stumbled back, surprised. Not hurt. Just shocked. Like he hadn't expected me to fight. Like he still thought I was the woman who stayed silent. Who obeyed. Who flinched. I didn't flinch. Not this time. I ran past him, out the door, down the hallway. I screamed Camille's name. Loud. Desperate. She appeared at the end of the hall, eyes wide, phone in hand. "He's here," I shouted. He broke in. She didn't hesitate. She pressed the emergency alert on her phone. A silent alarm. Direct to the police. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me into the office. Locked the door. Blocked it with a filing cabinet. Ethan pounded on the door. "Open it," he shouted. "You think you can hide from me?" Camille didn't respond. She just held me close, her body shielding mine. I was shaking, crying. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I was angry, furious, done. The pounding stopped. Silence. Then footsteps. Then the sound of something being dragged. Camille looked at me. "He's trying to break it down," she said. "Stay behind me." I nodded. My hands were clenched into fists. My nails digging into my palms. I wasn't going to let him win. Not again. "You think the police arrived in time?" They did. But what happened when they got there? It wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning. And Ethan? He finally ran out of lies. The sirens came fast. Lights flashed outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. Camille opened the window and waved. "We're in here," she called. "He's inside." The front door burst open. Officers flooded the hallway. Ethan tried to run, tried to escape. But there was nowhere to go. They tackled him, handcuffed him, dragged him out screaming. "You'll regret this," he shouted. "You think they'll protect you? You think this is over?" I watched from the window, watched him struggle, watched him scream, watched him lose. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Relief. They took him away. Camille and I sat in the office, breathing hard, hearts racing. The power came back on. The panic button lit up. The silence was deafening. I looked at Camille. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded. "You saved yourself," she said. "I just helped." You think that was the end of Ethan's control? It wasn't. Because what came next wasn't just legal. It was emotional. And facing him in court? That was the hardest thing I've ever done. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, just emotionally. Sterile. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're being watched even when no one's looking. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to keep them from shaking. Camille was beside me. So was Detective Marissa. They'd both been through this before. I hadn't. This was my first time sitting across from the man who tried to erase me, and doing it in front of strangers. Ethan was there, of course. Clean-shaven. Well-dressed. Calm. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not a hearing about illegal surveillance, domestic abuse, and stalking. He didn't look at me. Not once. But I could feel him. Like a shadow. Like a weight pressing against my chest. His lawyer was a woman with sharp features and a voice like ice. She smiled too much. Asked for leniency. Said Ethan was under stress. Said he was a respected member of the community. Said I was confused. I wanted to scream. The judge was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. He read through the charges slowly. Hidden cameras. Unauthorized recordings. Physical assault. Stalking. Harassment. Violation of privacy. I watched Ethan's face. Nothing. No reaction. Like he was reading a grocery list. Like none of it mattered. Like none of it was real. Then it was my turn. You think telling the truth in court was easy? It wasn't. Because when I stood up to speak, I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting for my voice. And reclaiming it. That was the hardest part. I walked to the witness stand slowly. My legs felt like they were made of glass. I sat down. Took the oath. Looked at the judge. Then at Ethan. Then back at the judge. Tell us what happened, he said. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I tried again. My voice cracked. He watched me, I said. He recorded me. Without my consent. In my bedroom. In my bathroom. In my life. I told them everything. The cameras. The tracker. The journals. The slap. The threats. The messages. The photo. The break-in. I told them about the night he stood in the doorway of the safe house. About the lamp. About the panic button that didn't work. About the fear. The silence. The rage. I told them how I'd lost myself. How I'd stopped recognizing my own reflection. How I'd stopped believing I deserved anything better. I cried. I shook. But I didn't stop. Ethan's lawyer tried to interrupt. Tried to object. Said I was being emotional. Said I was exaggerating. The judge overruled her. Let her speak, he said. So I did. I spoke until my throat was raw. Until my hands stopped shaking. Until the silence in the room felt like respect instead of judgment. When I finished, the judge nodded. Thank you, he said. You were brave to come forward. I nodded. I didn't feel brave. I felt exhausted. But I also felt something else. Something new. Something powerful. Relief. You think Ethan stayed silent? He didn't. Because when it was his turn to speak, he tried to twist everything. And the way he did it. It almost worked. He stood up. Walked to the stand. Smiled. I loved her, he said. I still do. I felt my stomach turn. She's confused. She's fragile. She's been through a lot. I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted to protect her. He talked about stress. About pressure. About how he'd made mistakes but never meant harm. He said the cameras were for safety. Said the tracker was for peace of mind. Said the journals were therapy. He looked at the judge. I'm not a monster, he said. I'm a husband who lost his way. I wanted to scream again. But I didn't have to. Because Marissa stood up next. She presented the evidence. The footage. The journals. The messages. The photo. The break-in. She showed the timestamps. The patterns. The escalation. She showed the judge exactly who Ethan was. Not the man in the suit. Not the man with the smile. But the man who watched. Who tracked. Who threatened. Who hurt. The judge listened. Took notes. Asked questions. Then he looked at Ethan. You didn't lose your way, he said. You created a system of control. You violated trust. You violated privacy. You violated safety. Ethan didn't respond, just stared at the floor. His mask was slipping. Finally. You think the verdict brought closure? It didn't. Because even after the judge spoke, even after the sentence was read, I still had to face the hardest part, learning how to live again. The courtroom emptied slowly. People filed out, whispering, glancing back at me like I was something fragile. Something cracked but still standing. Camille stayed close, her hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. Detective Marissa gave me a nod before disappearing down the hallway. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty bench where Ethan had stood, where he'd lied, where he'd tried to twist everything into something palatable, something forgivable. But the judge hadn't bought it. The sentence was clear. Ethan was going to prison. Not for life. Not forever. But long enough. Long enough for me to breathe again. Long enough for me to stop looking over my shoulder every time I walked to my car. Long enough for me to start rebuilding what he tried to destroy. Still, when I walked out of that courthouse, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Like I'd been holding my breath for years, and now that I could finally exhale, I didn't know how. The sunlight felt too bright. The air too loud. I kept expecting him to appear, to step out from behind a pillar, to whisper in my ear, "You'll never be rid of me." But he didn't. He was gone. And I was free. Sort of. You think freedom feels like peace? It doesn't. Not at first. Because when the abuse ends, the healing begins. And healing is its own kind of war. Camille drove me back to the safe house. I didn't say much. Just stared out the window, watching the city blur past. Everything looked different. Sharper. Colder. Like I was seeing it through new eyes. Eyes that had been forced open. Eyes that couldn't close again. When we arrived, she handed me a small envelope. "From the court," she said. "Your official protection order. He can't contact you. Not by phone. Not by letter. Not through anyone." I nodded, took the envelope, tucked it into my bag. It felt like a shield. A thin one, but a shield nonetheless. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection. I looked older. Not in years. In wear. In weight. My eyes had shadows. My skin had tension. My mouth had lines that hadn't been there before. I touched my cheek. The bruise was gone. But the memory wasn't. It never would be. I opened my journal. The one I'd started after I found the first camera. I flipped through the pages. The dates. The entries. The fear. The rage. The silence. I reached the last page and stared at the blank space. Then I picked up a pen and wrote, "He's gone. But I'm still here. And that matters." You think healing is linear? It's not. Because some days I felt strong, and other days, I couldn't even get out of bed. And the first time I tried to smile, it felt like betrayal. The next morning, I tried to go for a walk. Just around the block. Just to feel the sun on my face. I made it halfway before I had a panic attack. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. I dropped to my knees on the sidewalk, gasping for air. Camille found me minutes later. She didn't say anything. Just sat beside me until the shaking stopped. "I thought I was okay," I whispered. She nodded. "You are," she said. "You're just healing. And healing hurts." I started therapy again. Twice a week. Dr. Patel was patient. She didn't push. She just asked questions. Gentle ones. Hard ones. Ones that made me cry. Ones that made me think. She asked me what I missed. I said, the version of him I thought was real. She asked me what I feared. I said, that I'll never trust anyone again. She asked me what I wanted. I said, to feel like myself. She smiled. That's a good place to start. I started writing more. Not just in the journal. In letters. In poems. In fragments. I wrote about the cameras. The silence. The bruises. The lies. I wrote about the night I swung the lamp. About the moment I screamed. About the second the police tackled him. I wrote about the courtroom. About the judge. About the sentence. I wrote about the photo he sent. The message. The letter. I wrote until my hand cramped and my heart felt lighter. You think writing was just therapy? It wasn't. Because when I shared my story online, something unexpected happened, and it changed everything. Camille suggested I post something. Just a short message. Just a note to say, I survived. I hesitated. I didn't want attention. I didn't want pity. But I wanted connection. So I wrote a post. Just a few lines. My name is Ava. I survived 3 years of abuse. I fought back. I testified. He's in prison now. And I'm healing. Slowly. But I'm healing. I posted it. Then I turned off my phone. When I checked it the next morning, there were hundreds of comments. Thousands of likes. Messages from strangers. Survivors. Supporters. People who said, me too. People who said, thank you. People who said, I needed this. I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I wasn't alone anymore. The post went viral. I didn't expect it. I didn't even check my phone for hours after I hit publish. I thought maybe a few people would see it. Maybe a handful would comment. I wasn't looking for attention. I just needed to say it. To put it out into the world. To reclaim the narrative Ethan had tried to control for so long. But when I finally opened my phone the next morning, I had hundreds of notifications. Messages from strangers. Comments from survivors. Emails from women who said they'd been through the same thing. Some were still in it. Some had just escaped. Some had never told a soul, until they read my words. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Leah. She wrote, I read your story at 3 a.m. I'm sitting in my car right now with my 2 kids. We left. Because of you. Thank you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I cried. Not the kind of crying that comes from fear or grief. This was different. This was release. This was purpose. This was the moment I realized that my pain could mean something. That maybe, just maybe, I hadn't survived for nothing. Camille saw the post too. She knocked on my door that afternoon, holding her phone. You're blowing up, she said with a smile. You've got people talking. People listening. I shrugged. I didn't mean to. She sat beside me. That's why it matters. Because it's real. Because it's raw. Because it's you. You think going viral made me feel powerful? It didn't. Not at first. Because with every message of support came another wave of fear. What if Ethan saw it? What if he found a way to reach me? I started having nightmares again. Not about the past, but about the future. About Ethan getting out. About him finding me. About him reading my words and deciding to punish me for them. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, convinced he was in the room. Camille would sit with me, rub my back, remind me that he was behind bars. That I was safe. But fear doesn't care about facts. It lives in your bones. It whispers in your ear. It waits. Still, I kept writing. I started a blog. I called it Still Here. I posted once a week. Sometimes more. I wrote about the early days. The red flags I missed. The excuses I made. The way he isolated me. The way he rewrote reality. I wrote about the night I found the camera. About the trial. About the safe house. About the first time I laughed again and didn't feel guilty. People responded. They shared their own stories. They asked questions. They offered support. A community began to form. Survivors. Advocates. Friends. Strangers. We weren't alone anymore. We were a chorus. A movement. A force. Then a podcast reached out. The host was a woman named Talia. She'd read my blog. She wanted to interview me. Just your voice, she said. No video. No pressure. Just a conversation. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready. But something inside me said yes. So I did it. We recorded the episode in a quiet studio. Just the 2 of us and a microphone. Talia asked thoughtful questions. She didn't sensationalize. She didn't push. She just listened. And I talked. For over an hour. I told my story. In my own words. In my own voice. When it aired, the response was overwhelming. You think telling my story out loud was terrifying? It was. But it was also liberating. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was leading. And people were following. After the podcast, I started getting invitations, panels, conferences, support groups. People wanted me to speak, to share, to guide. I said yes to some, no to others. I was careful. I was still healing, but I was also growing, finding my footing, finding my power. I met other survivors, women who had escaped, women who were still fighting, women who had lost everything and were building it back brick by brick. We cried together, laughed together, held space for each other. There was no judgment, no shame, just truth, just strength. One night, after a panel discussion, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 20. She looked nervous. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I didn't think anyone would believe me. But then I heard you. And I thought, maybe they will. I hugged her, held her tight. They will, I said. And even if they don't, you believe you. That's enough. That night, I wrote a new post. I called it The Power of One Voice. I wrote, it only takes one person to break the silence, one voice to crack the wall, one story to light the way. If you're reading this, and you're scared, and you're stuck, know this, you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are not weak. You are surviving. And that is strength. You think I became fearless? I didn't. But I learned something better. I learned how to live with fear, and not let it own me. Rebuilding your life after trauma isn't like flipping a switch. It's not a clean break. It's not a fresh start. It's a slow, messy, unpredictable process. Some days you feel strong. Other days you feel like you're drowning in memories you didn't ask to keep. That's what the weeks after the trial felt like. A strange mix of freedom and fear, of possibility and paralysis. I moved out of the safe house 3 weeks after Ethan was sentenced. Camille helped me find a small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet space with sunlight and locks I controlled. The first night I slept there, I kept every light on. I checked the windows 3 times. I placed a chair under the doorknob. I didn't sleep. But I didn't cry either. That felt like progress. I started working again. Not full-time. Just a few shifts at a local clinic. The staff knew my story. Camille had briefed them. They were kind, patient. They didn't ask questions. They just let me work. Let me feel useful. Let me remember what it felt like to help someone else. That first paycheck felt surreal. Like I'd earned something. Like I'd taken a step toward independence. But trust. That was harder. You think rebuilding trust is about other people? It's not. It starts with yourself. And for me, trusting myself again was the hardest part of all. I kept second-guessing everything. Every decision. Every instinct. Every emotion. I'd walk into a room and scan for cameras. I'd meet someone new and wonder what they wanted from me. I'd hear a compliment and flinch, waiting for the manipulation underneath. I didn't trust my own judgment. Not after Ethan. Not after falling for the illusion he built so perfectly. Dr. Patel helped. We kept meeting weekly. She asked questions that made me think. That made me dig. That made me confront the parts of myself I'd buried. She said, "You didn't fail. You adapted. You survived." I said, "But I stayed." She said, "Because you were trying to stay alive. That's not weakness. That's instinct." I started journaling again. Not just about the past, but about the present. About the little victories. The quiet moments. The first time I slept through the night. The first time I laughed at a joke. The first time I walked into a store without scanning the ceiling for hidden lenses. I wrote it all down. I needed to see it. To believe it. Then I met someone. His name was Jordan. He worked at the clinic. A physical therapist. Kind eyes. Gentle voice. He didn't know my story at first. Just treated me like a colleague. Like a person. He asked about my favorite movies. My favorite food. My favorite childhood memory. I told him about the time my sister and I built a fort out of blankets and pretended we were explorers. He laughed, said he used to do the same thing. I felt something stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Interest, curiosity, hope. You think falling for someone new erased the past? It didn't. Because every step forward came with a shadow, and learning to love again meant learning to trust again. I told Jordan the truth after a month. I didn't want to hide it. I didn't want to pretend. We were sitting in a park, watching the sunset. I said, "There's something you need to know." He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't flinch. When I finished, he said, "Thank you for telling me. That must have taken a lot." I nodded. "I'm still figuring things out," I said. "I'm not whole yet." He smiled. "You don't have to be." We took things slow. No pressure. No expectations. Just conversations. Just time. He never pushed. Never pried. Just showed up. Just stayed. That meant more than anything. Because Ethan had always rushed. Always demanded. Always controlled. Jordan didn't. Jordan let me breathe. One night, I told him about the necklace. The tracker. The way Ethan had disguised control as affection. Jordan looked at me and said, "That wasn't love. That was ownership. And you're not something to be owned." I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I believed him. You think healing means forgetting? It doesn't. It means remembering without breaking. And the first time I told my story without crying, that's when I knew I was healing. I spoke at a conference 6 months after the trial. A panel on survivor advocacy. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and told my story. From beginning to end. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just spoke. Clear. Steady. Honest. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone stood. Then another. Then applause. Long, loud. Real. Afterward, a woman approached me. She was older. Grey hair. Soft eyes. She said, "I left my husband last week. After 32 years. Because of you." I hugged her. Held her tight. "You're not alone," I said. "You never were." That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding. And every brick I lay is mine." I got the letter on a Tuesday. It was folded neatly inside a plain envelope. No return address. Just my name typed across the front. I knew what it was before I opened it. I could feel it in my bones. The weight of it. The chill. I sat down at the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and unfolded the paper. Notice of parole hearing. Ethan James Carter. Date, October 14th. Location, Travis County Courthouse. I stared at the words for a long time. They didn't feel real. It had only been 18 months. 18 months since the trial. Since the cameras. Since the break-in. Since the sentence. I thought I'd have more time. I thought I'd have more space. But the system doesn't move with emotion. It moves with paperwork. With policy. With loopholes. Camille came over that night. I handed her the letter. She read it silently, then looked up at me. "You don't have to go," she said. "You don't have to speak." I nodded. I know. But I also knew I would. Because silence is what kept me trapped for so long. And I wasn't going back. You think facing him again was easy? It wasn't. Because this time, I wasn't just a survivor. I was a witness. And my words could decide whether he walked free. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Not just legally, but emotionally. I met with Dr. Patel. We talked about triggers. About boundaries. About strength. She said, "You don't owe anyone your pain. But if you choose to share it, make sure it's on your terms." I nodded. I'd been sharing my story for months now. Online, in interviews, at conferences. But this was different. This was personal. This was direct. I wrote my statement late one night. Sat at my desk with a cup of tea and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I stared at the blank page for hours. Then I started writing. I am not here to punish. I am here to protect. To protect myself. To protect others. to protect the truth. I wrote about the cameras, the tracker, the journals, the slap, the threats, the break-in. I wrote about the fear, the silence, the way he rewrote reality. I wrote about the trial, the healing, the blog, the podcast, the community. I wrote about Leah, about the woman who left after 32 years, about the girl who said, maybe they'll believe me. I wrote until the sun came up. Then I printed it, folded it, tucked it into my bag. The day of the hearing, I wore black. Not because I was mourning, but because I was armored. I walked into the courthouse with Camille beside me. My hands were steady. My breath was slow. My heart was loud, but it wasn't panicked. It was ready. Ethan was already there, sitting at the table with his lawyer. He looked older, thinner, but the expression was the same. Calm, controlled, like he still thought he could win. You think he'd changed? He hadn't. Because when he spoke, it was the same performance, the same manipulation. And the way he tried to twist the truth? It almost worked. He stood up, addressed the board, said he was sorry, said he'd made mistakes, said he'd learned, said he'd found God, said he wanted to help others now, said he'd never hurt anyone again. His voice was soft. His posture was humble. His words were rehearsed. I watched the board members nod, take notes, ask questions. I felt my stomach twist. I knew that look, that tone, that charm. I'd lived with it, slept beside it, believed it. Once. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, unfolded my statement, took a breath. My name is Ava. I am here today because I survived Ethan Carter. I read every word, slowly, clearly, steadily. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't flinch. I just spoke. I told them what he did, how he did it, why it mattered. I told them about the cameras, the control, the silence. I told them about the break-in, the photo, the message. I told them about the fear that still lived in my bones. Then I looked up, right at Ethan. You didn't break me, I said. You tried, but you failed. And I will not let you do it to anyone else. I turned to the board. Release him, and you risk another victim. Keep him, and you protect a future. Silence. Then a nod. Then a thank you. I walked back to my seat. Camille squeezed my hand. I exhaled. You think the board made their decision right away? They didn't. Because justice takes time, and waiting for it? That was its own kind of torture. We waited for hours. In a small room. With bad coffee and buzzing lights. I stared at the wall. Camille paced. Then the door opened. A man in a suit stepped in. The board has reached a decision, he said. Parole denied. I felt my knees buckle. Camille caught me. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. Quietly. Gratefully. Ethan was escorted out. He didn't look at me. Not once. It's been 2 years since the trial. 2 years since I stood in that courtroom and told the truth. 2 years since Ethan was sentenced. Since the cameras were removed. Since the silence was broken. And I'm still here. I say that phrase a lot now. Still here. It's become my mantra. My anchor. My reminder. Because there were nights I didn't think I would be. Nights when the fear was louder than my heartbeat. When the memories felt heavier than my body. When I thought disappearing might be easier than rebuilding. But I didn't disappear. I stayed. I fought. I healed. Sort of. Healing isn't a finish line. It's not a destination. It's a process. A rhythm. A choice. Some days I wake up and feel strong. Other days I wake up and feel like I'm still crawling through the wreckage. But I keep moving. I keep choosing myself. Over and over again. I still see Dr. Patel. Not as often. Just once a month now. We talk about boundaries. About growth. About the strange guilt that comes with happiness. She says, you're allowed to feel joy. You're allowed to feel safe. You're allowed to live. I nod. I believe her. Most days. I still write. The blog is bigger now. Thousands of readers. Hundreds of messages. Survivors from all over the world. Some share their stories. Some just say thank you. Some say, I left because of you. That one always hits me hardest. Because I remember what it felt like to stay. To believe the lie. To think love meant pain. You think survival is the end of the story? It's not. Because surviving is just the beginning. And what comes after is where the real story lives. I moved again. A new apartment. Bigger. Brighter. With plants and books and sunlight. Jordan helped me pick it out. He's still in my life. Still kind. Still patient. We're not rushing. We're not labeling. We're just being. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Sometimes I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the mask to slip. For the control to creep in. But it doesn't. Jordan doesn't push. Doesn't pry. Doesn't perform. He just shows up. Just listens. Just stays. And slowly, I'm learning to let him. I started volunteering. At a shelter. For women escaping abuse. I sit with them. Listen to them. Hold space for them. I don't give advice. I don't tell them what to do. I just say, I believe you. And sometimes, that's all they need. Sometimes, that's everything. One woman, her name was Rena, asked me, how did you know it was time to leave? I thought about it. Then I said, I didn't. I just knew I couldn't stay. She nodded. She understood. She left 2 days later. I still think about her. Still hope she's okay. You think telling your story is about closure? It's not. It's about connection. About lighting a path for someone else. About saying, me too, and meaning it. I've spoken at more conferences now. Written more articles. Been interviewed on more podcasts. But the most important thing I ever did was say yes to myself. To my truth. To my voice. Because for years, Ethan tried to silence me. Tried to shrink me. Tried to erase me. And now, I'm louder than ever. I got another letter recently. From the parole board. Ethan applied again. I read it. Then I folded it. Then I threw it away. I didn't go this time. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The system had enough. My voice had already done its work. And I wasn't going to give him another minute of my life. Instead, I went to the beach. Alone. I sat in the sand and watched the waves. I wrote in my journal. I walked barefoot. I laughed. I cried. I breathed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I wrote a new post that night. The last one in the series. I called it, The End of the Beginning. I wrote, I survived. I healed. I rebuilt. And now I live. Not in fear. Not in silence. But in truth. In strength. In light. If you're reading this, and you're still trapped, still scared, still unsure, know this, you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are surviving. And that is power. That is fire. That is the beginning of everything. You think this is the end of my story? It's not. Because I'm still here. And every day I wake up, I write a new chapter. One breath at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for being part of this journey. I'm Ava. I survived. And now I live.